Good evening. I'm Ed Gallagher, President of the American Scandinavian Foundation, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this evening's program, Design Policy, Lessons Learned. This symposium is part of a two-part series, it's second of a two-part series, Nordic Design Now, which is held in conjunction with the two design exhibitions currently on view, the first at the Cooper-Hewitt National Design Museum entitled National Triennial 2010, Why Design Now? And the second here at Scandinavia House, Nordic Models plus Common Ground, Art and Design Unfolded. And the exhibition is on our third floor, and I encourage you to take a look at it if you haven't already seen it. I'd like to first express the great thanks that we feel toward the Nordic Culture Fund for the funding of these two symposia. And I'd also like to express a great pleasure and gratification that we at the ASF feel for the cooperation with the Cooper-Hewitt. Also, I think it's been a great sign of pan-Nordic cooperation. All the consulates have joined in this endeavor, and we're very, very grateful for that joint cooperation. We're also very pleased that all of the consuls general of the Nordic countries are with us this evening. And if I may, I'd like to introduce them. His Excellency Jarl Friis Madsen of Denmark, Her Excellency Ritva Joikinen of Finland, Mr. Linar Gudjonsson of Iceland, Her Excellency Sissel Bray of Norway, and David Dangour, Honorary Consul General of Sweden. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for the great help that you've given us with this evening. We're also very honored to have with us tonight His Excellency Trond Giske, the Minister of Trade and Industry for Norway. And I'd like to now invite him to take the podium. Mr. Giske.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure and indeed an honor to open this seminar, this panel. As now presently the Minister of Trade, Business and Industries in Norway, but having been Minister of Culture for 4 years, I think this combination of culture and business which lies in design is truly a very interesting one. And it's also a pleasure to have been up here and seen the exhibition, Nordic Models, Common Ground, which marks both the 10th anniversary of the Scandinavian House, congratulations, and the centennial year of the American Scandinavian Foundation. And what could possibly be more or a better way of celebrating this anniversary than displaying some of the best art and architecture that the Nordic countries have on offer. Our Nordic society is, we feel in the Nordic countries that we are quite different, but viewed from other places in the world, I think the Nordic countries have very similar traits. We are quite similar in certain ways. We are very egalitarian societies. We have a strong social welfare. We have a strong link to nature, which is, of course, reflected in our architecture as well and in our design. And the exhibition demonstrates how Nordic designers are embracing and indeed exporting those high-held values. And as a Norwegian, I would add you couldn't possibly find a better candidate to create the exhibition than the Oslo-based architectural firm Snøhetta. I would like also to acknowledge the Cooper-Hewitt National Design Museum and Scandinavian House, and also the Nordic Consulate Generals for co-hosting the Scandinavian House Symposium. The question at hand for the 5 Nordic panelists is a timely one. How does policy cultivate the right conditions for design markets to be competitive on a global scale and still be socially minded? My answer is threefold. First, good business management is about planning without knowing what the future might bring. Particularly during times of recession, it is important for governments and businesses alike to prepare for the next upturn by investing in innovation, uniqueness, and future competitiveness. And maybe is it exactly in these times when business conditions are a little more harsh, people have more time on their hand, maybe it's exactly in these times the really creativity comes forward and creates the new markets and the new possibilities for business. Second, we must carry on identifying those ever-changing consumer needs and create unique products and services that are both high in demand and at the same time contribute to sustainable world economy and environment. And finally, because design policy is about putting the spotlight on the end user, and because good design product promotes innovation and new competitive advantages, a goal-oriented innovation policy is much about investing in design. In Norway, we have seen that the consumer or a conscious approach to design ensures profitability and competitive power. Consider Norway Post. This company saw its reputation ranking rise 13 places from 25th to 12th place after launching a new visual identity for being a Norway Post. Or one of Norway's leading hotel chains, Thon Hotels, which increased turnover by more than 50% after launching a new web design, a new website, and a new online booking system. These two examples show why the Norwegian government is highlighting design as an important innovation tool. All the Nordic countries are high-cost countries. We have high salaries, and we don't try to compete on the world stage by lowering our wages or competing on low-cost products. Because our high level of salaries, that's our living standard, and we want to keep this living standard. So thus we have to be more productive, more innovative, and try to create those products that we can make these extra money that supports this high cost level. At the core of the Norwegian design methodology is willingness and ability to carry through radical innovation, from the conception of an idea to the launch of a new service and a good. Through agencies, programs, and initiatives, the Norwegian Ministry of Trade and Industry, together with the Ministry of Culture, aims to inform, inspire, and assist the private sector to use design as a strategic tool to develop innovating products and services. Innovation Norway is one important tool in this public support system. We know that private sector, they can do a lot, but there are some collective goods that aren't provided by the private sector alone. So this combination with a public spent or a public supported system together with a private sector dynamic is, I think, part of the success in the Nordic countries. Another key tool is the Norwegian Design Council, which has as a task to spread information, to contribute to increased use of design, and to build confidence in design as an innovation tool. We discovered that the exchange of ideas, best practice examples, and just the increase of knowledge is an important factor in making businesses more successful in using design. We have an initiative that we particularly are excited about, that is the Design-Driven Innovation Program. This program puts design on the agenda in Norwegian boardrooms and draw on the practical experiences of design-driven innovation methods to help disseminate knowledge both in the business sector and in the design industry. Through this program, we will make use of the national database of factual information to draw up a targeted program of action for design in business policy in the years ahead. Inclusive design is set to become an important design movement in the 21st century. The involvement of end users in the design and development process is becoming more successful and proven way of engaging with consumers. And for much more than a decade, inclusive design has been on the political agenda in Norway. We are now introducing new legislation to put the principles into practice. There are many examples of practical daily life inventions that originated from a people-centered and inclusive approach. The one-hand lever tap is beneficial for anyone multitasking in the kitchen. The remote control developed for people with disabilities is handy for anyone immersed in the sofa. And automatic doors make it easier for anyone to enter a building, whether on foot, wheels, or using crutches. No one has ever complained about a package being too easy to open, a door too simple to enter, or an instruction too easy to understand. Inclusive design housing makes living spaces more comfortable. Furthermore, it's sustainable in the long term. It ensures independency, dignity, and quality of life even at old age. These are just a few examples of how inclusive design is better for everyone. how inclusive design is relevant for better business, and how inclusive design promotes human diversity, social inclusion, and equality. Therefore, it has great resonance with the current political administration. And of course, the big issues of sustainability, the environment and the climate change. To build in an environmental friendly way was one of the key factors in the architectural plan that I promoted when I was a Minister of Culture. I think when we can include the environmental friendly constructions into everyday business, not just as the extra, the particular building or the great examples, but in everyday construction work, that is when we succeed in getting energy efficient buildings to build in a good way. We had a new construction in my hometown now, where we have, I think we are down to 65 kilowatts an hour per square meter, and where we are building a green society, combining new electronics, new technologies in regulating the use of energy with practical good solution for people in their daily lives. It is in this way how we include design, good solutions for the future in the overall economy. It's when we succeed. I would like to take this opportunity to again congratulate Scandinavian House on their 10th anniversary and the American Scandinavian Foundation on their 100th anniversary, and good luck with the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to turn the evening over to the moderator, Brad McKee, Editor-in-Chief of Landscape Architecture magazine, author of many pieces that we've all read in the New York Times and other publications, and author of many books. So it's all yours. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brad McKee. It's a real honor to be here tonight, not least because I have to say we in the United States have really nothing like the elaborate and sophisticated policies that support design that we see in the Nordic countries. I'm going to try to keep this quite loose and go, first I will introduce our panelists, and then I will ask them a series of very basic questions to bring out the fundamentals of the programs they manage. And that they work within. On my immediate left is Christian Scherfig. He is the CEO of the Danish Design Center. Sanna-Mari is the development director of the World Design Capital Helsinki 2012. Hadla Helgadottir is the managing director of the Iceland Design Center. Lavrans Løvlie is a co-founder of the London-based service design agency liveIwork and is here to address Norwegian support for design. And finally, we have Edman, who is the chief executive of the Swedish Industrial Design Foundation in Stockholm, I presume. Okay, I'm going to start at the beginning. Some of you have design policies. Some of you have policies that support design. I want to ask a couple of you, especially, I guess, perhaps Denmark can answer this most sort of substantively. What is a design policy, and why do you need one?
Well, Denmark has had 3 national design policies over the past 13 years. The first one in '97, and the purpose with that was to increase the design awareness in small and mid-sized enterprises. In 2003, we launched the second national design policy, and the purpose was still to try to increase the use of design in the Danish enterprises. But beside of that, it was the introduction of the Index Award. And in 2007, the government took the initiative to the third design policy, and still focusing on the effort to increase the use of design in the Danish enterprises. But besides that, the introduction of a $16.5 million US program. It was a comprehensive user-driven innovation program with the purpose of develop and test user-driven methods. So one could say overall that the purpose with the design policy in Denmark is first of all to try to increase the national competitiveness abilities, the reflection that as a nation we can't produce cheap goods. China can do that, but we can choose. But we can produce with including design on a very high level as part of the strategic foundation of the enterprises and full product development.
Let's talk a little about scope. To bring it into sort of the material realm, we have things like infrastructure, engineering, things that get things done, the heavy-duty industrial kinds of things, and then you have the more fun stuff like fashion and graphics and packaging and architecture and things that we use. What is the scope of the Danish design policy? Is it pan design? Is it targeted towards certain industries?
As far as I remember, the fashion industry is actually Denmark's 4th or 5th biggest export industry, so it's quite huge in Denmark. And when we talk about design in Denmark, it's not only about aesthetics or form giving. Very much inspired by Index, we include a lot of other aspects of design, whether it's graphic design or it's service design and so on. So it's not a very narrow definition we use in Denmark now. It used to be more narrow only some very few years ago. I would say which could be a problem. It includes almost everything.
And am I correct in reporting that you're in a quite conspicuous location in Copenhagen, right?
Yeah, rather.
Are you on is it the building in the town?
Sorry?
Are you in the center of town, or?
Yeah, it's in the middle of just next to Tivoli.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought I remembered. So let me skip to Hadla. You were talking earlier about your country developing in the process of trying to develop a design policy and supporting designers in other ways until then. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we are in the process of negotiating with the government about making a design policy. Iceland is quite new in this design scene. Of course, we have had architecture and design, graphic design for a long time, but there are many young people coming out with education in fashion and product, and there's a need, I think, in Iceland for a strategy and for a focus on this field. So we are hoping that we will be able to sign a contract with the government, the Minister of Industry and the Ministry of Culture and Education before Christmas.
Okay, excellent. And can I just follow up by asking, is that a purely administrative push on the ministry's part, or is there a legislative or parliamentarian interest in this movement?
No, it's purely, I mean, it's... I think through the Iceland Design Center is quite new, and there's quite a push from that field on focusing on that field, because we haven't had that so much before. So now we are trying to push the government to change their ways and look in our direction. So it's the designers and the design scene and the government.
Okay, I'm going to get to everybody, but I want to skip to Robin really quickly, because you had described earlier that the support for design by the Swedish government is rather indirect. You had mentioned, do we want to buy them fish or do we want to buy them a net? Can you tell us a little bit about Sweden's approach to supporting design as a policy or a set of policies?
I'll be real short to start with, and then we can get back to this.
Okay.
A couple of years back, we would have said, yes, we want a policy. Now we want to include design in other policies, and that's what we're working on. So we're trying to work with the government to see that design is an important tool, and looking at what's happening in the EU with the new Innovation Union, which was launched on October 6th, which is basically a huge innovation program for the entire EU. That will filter down through all the different countries, and there is design in that. There's been a huge push to get design into the new innovation policy of the EU. that eventually will happen in all the European countries. And Sweden being the good country that we've always been, we want to be first with introducing all these things. So we hope that that will actually happen in Sweden as well. We are right now in the process of working with the government on a service innovation strategy, which they're launching, and that eventually will lead to a service innovation policy. Also in that one, we see that the design aspects have been a part of creating that one. So we do have it, but as you said, indirect, and we can get back to who we're supporting, if it's the designers or the businesses and whatnot later.
Okay, I'd like to also put this in terms of a chronology. We could talk a little bit about Lavrans. You had mentioned you had begun. When was it? Was it a couple of years ago with this effort? I'm trying to place this in time. When did these policies begin to originate? They must come from a sort of a deeply ingrained social consciousness, but when did these sort of more formal policies come about? I would like each of you to answer if possible, but I'll start with you, Lavrans.
Well, I think for Norway's sake, the Norwegian Design Council is 50 years old.
50?
Yeah,
really? And
I think probably similar to the Swedish and Danish, and they're based on the model of the British Design Council.
Okay.
Which is there to really promote design within industry to make industry more competitive.
Right.
But there's a change happening, and in the last 5 years we see that it's not the investment in improving industry and creating new products, but it's looking at design as an innovation driver, and that really opens up for looking at completely different design objects. So it's not necessarily earthware and furniture, starting to look at services like hospital, looking at energy usage. So basically the pressing needs of our day. There are enough chairs around, I think. Right. But the problems we're really facing is it's health, it's how to deal with our personal finances, it's how to deal with energy consumption, it's how to communicate better. So I think we're seeing that shift where design is there to promote innovation rather than to be something you strap on to an industrial process in the end.
Sure. There are these very salient economic shifts, globalization, communication changes, cheap and ineffective goods coming from certain parts of the world that make it all the more exigent, I think, for countries to sort of double down on the quality of their design. Could you tell us a little bit about Finland's policy in this regard and how it may have changed in recent times, given new economic pressures?
Sure. I think the situation is very similar to Sweden and Norway, actually. There is no formal design policy as such at place in Finland. Currently, we're very focused on the World Design Capital initiative, and it has a very clear structure of implying and inducing design into every level of the society's planning processes, in business, in services, in urban planning. I think it's very important to identify the role of design in all these processes. After the World Design Capital year, I think we will be a lot wiser in putting in place a policy that can carry us to 2017, 2020, where our strategy vision is placed on.
Okay. And tell us about the case with Iceland. Hadla, could you a little bit, the recent times and why this may be more exigent than it was in the past?
Yeah, like I was saying before that there's quite a change going on in Iceland right now. We have had an economical collapse, and and we are trying to build up new industries. And I think the creative sector in Iceland could be very strong there. We have a very strong creative sector as such, and in music and film, and that's a scene that is not part of the collapse now. So I think it's really important for us to boost that scene and to focus on what we have, and work from there. So I think because we have a support system that focuses on technology and understands high tech things, but they really don't understand the design thinking and how to approach that field. So I think this is an important part of that change, which is really needed now.
Yeah.
And has started.
Yeah. Well, I want to be really clear. I'm fascinated by this because, again, we have nothing like this in the United States. The federal government has a program within the General Services Administration, which is the federal government's landlord, to increase the quality of design in federal buildings, courthouses, border stations, facilities like that. Otherwise, the federal government in the United States, really, designers are on their own here. So, it's always it's heartening. It's also a little depressing to see how little we do when we see how much the Nordic countries do. And a few other countries, I believe Korea and India, have very robust design policies. Robin, did you, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that one. Because what you're saying, you're talking about designers.
Designers.
And what I'm saying is design is a tool to help businesses or organizations. So the question is, the fish in the net, should we help the businesses by integrating design into their organizations, and the designers there by default will then get more to do, or should we help the designers per se? And I think in the Nordic countries, yes, we're to some extent helping the designers, but we're helping the businesses to understand that design is extremely important to grow their businesses, because we're such a small little group together. There are 22 million people in the Nordic countries.
Sure.
And if we're going to grow and expand and be healthy and all that you heard before, we need to go out into the world, and to be able to do that, we need to be a little bit more than what we are today in terms of what we have to export. As was said before, I mean, we can't do what the Chinese are doing better than the Chinese, so we need to do something else. And we need to integrate design into the businesses. And if the businesses understand, they will grow. It will become the leverage that will make them a little bit different. And therefore, then the designers will get the work. So we're focusing more on the business side of it than the designers per se. Now, the designers have businesses as well, so we're going to help them. But it's not, we're going to help designers to become profitable, we're going to help the businesses to become profitable.
And Sanna-Mari, it seemed as if when I looked at the material from Finland, the sort of summaries of support for design, it also seemed to fall in with a broader cultural export support. Can you tell us a little about that? I mean, there was theater and film and dance and music and all kinds of things. It fell in among those.
Yeah, there has been a very strong tendency towards creating export opportunities for different kinds of culture and art forms. It's not that reason, it's just been documented and administered maybe better for the past 10 years than it has before. I think there's also a very big process going on in Finland where we start to recognize the strengths in our culture. From a point of view of design, for example, we have very strong roots in industrial design, on everyday design. This is kind of self-evident from the Finnish point of view, and we haven't really struggled to make that, capitalize that. And in recent years, there has been a lot of development in the government and the state and administration towards trying to capitalize on these kind of inherent cultural tendencies that we have. From the World Design Capital point of view, I think it's a very good time for us to start to develop this further. There's a lot of interest towards certain kind of things globally, and we have a lot of things to offer, for example, towards sustainable development design. And I think it's more kind of an inherent process than it actually is a policy-making process.
Well, so I want to talk about sort of the level of unanimity in the government about supporting design. Is this pretty much across the board? You talk to most people, and this is common sense. We could start with you, Christian. Are there any dissenters who think this is perhaps not important and that you should be supporting other things like, I don't know, agriculture or something in its stead?
Are you talking about the government focus or
in the government? I mean, especially when it comes down to paying for it, because in the United States, that's always a big deal. Is who's paying for this and what are we paying for? And there are, I mean, I won't lie to you, there are retrograde elements in our politics who think that these things are frivolous, even though they go to the heart of economy and efficiency and innovation. So is this unanimous within sort of officialdom in Denmark?
Well, I would say our sitting government was formed back in 2001, and at that time they were pretty design ignorant. But later on, they were very convinced of the importance of investing in design, and as Robin said, the buyer side of design. Even though we do create a bridge to the seller side of design. The prime focus is the buyer side of design. And since 2005, I would say they've been very keen on the design investments and very, very focused that this is a very important innovation driver for Denmark. And even though we have some funds challenges as well as other countries, we in Denmark do increase the government investments in our area. So yeah, we have a lot of positive energy from the government. And my expectation would be, even though we had a change of government, we will still have that support.
In the United States, a lot of interest among corporations, corporate leaders, the business community has come up. I give a lot of credit. I was talking with Robin about this earlier. Business Week magazine has had a lot to do with pushing design among industrial decision makers in the United States. They've made it very, they've raised the consciousness level infinitely over what it was 15 years ago. They began with the Design Awards program. Now, people, sort of slicker business magazines. Fast Company is another one that really puts a focus on industrial design in a very routine and casual way. So it is, you get this excitement within the private sector from the media, but again, it's all originating in the private sector. It's not, there may be people sort of in the Commerce Department in the United States would probably be the focal point for efforts like this. They're not really bringing it along, so it's all privately driven. What's the situation in Finland? Is it fairly unanimous? Are there people who believe this may not be the best use of anyone's time or money, or?
Actually, I think the design is the only thing that we really agree upon.
Really? I can see that. I believe you.
Which I never thought of before you asked me that question, but it's true. From all the culture effort, from all the effort towards different kinds of project creation, investment from the government, investment from the businesses, I mean, I don't think there is such a thing as a unanimous voice, if you will. There are always people who disagree on policy level or just pure from the money perspective. But again, from our project's point of view and from doing this, and really the government and the participating cities investing fairly heavily on this project, there has not been any kind of questions raised so far if this money is well spent or not. So in that sense, I guess we have a unanimous voice in this one thing.
That's good, that's good. Lavrans, we were talking earlier, you're focused on service design as opposed to the design of goods. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why that has increased in importance in recent times?
Well, I'm educated as an industrial designer here in America, and kind of came from that thing that I learned, that design was there to unite function and beauty with trying to meet fundamental human needs. And I think we're just really old-fashioned industrial designers, really. So we're trying to kind of take design to the service economy, which is about 75% of our economies.
Sure.
So, and we're seeing that space really open up, and I don't know exactly how it's going to shape itself, but in Denmark, they've really done some impressive things around it. And in terms of policy in Norway, I think the minister actually did a very, very good job, so there's not too much for me to say, other than adding some detail. But he's talking about the Design Innovation Program, which is a program where they each year give away about $1.5 million to organizations that want to try design in new ways. And last year they had companies applying for more than $10 million. So it showed that there was this huge untapped market of organizations like school boards, hospitals, public institutions, service providers that really wanted to use design in a new and different way. And some they were able to. So I think there's a market that's really growing there, and I'm really hoping that in the Scandinavian countries, where we have pretty strong welfare states, that we can apply design to our public services and see if we can turn it into an export good. and I can't really see why it shouldn't be possible in a long-term view.
Sure. Yes, Robin.
Let me give you an example of how to use design in a different way. We have small towns in the northern part of Sweden that are mining towns. One little town is called Gällivare, and they're digging deeper into the mine. And as they're digging, the ground is crumbling. And if you go in on the web and look for Gällivare, you'll see pictures of this huge hole. There's a giant pit where basically you can see roads going into the pit where there were once houses and churches and schools and whatnot. And they're continuing to dig deeper, and there will be more pits created. You have to move everybody that lives there. Now, we use design to get the mining company, the municipality, and the people to start talking to each other to see what was important about people living there, working there, moving there, and what would happen when they moved. So we had this huge workshop with 40 delegates from 18 countries for 2 weeks up in Gällivare to actually look at, using the design process and going through everything that designers do, to look at what was attractive about Gällivare and how could we move instead of just doing a grid and houses and saying that's where your new house is going to be, to see how they would create a new place to live. So that's, once again, service design. We didn't create a single object, but looking at how you can create a new place to live by use of design.
Sure. We have some kind of similar activity, as many of you are probably aware, in New Orleans, where there's a lot of activity around rebuilding communities after Hurricane Katrina, making them sustainable for the future. A lot of folks believe it's just not a fit place to live in many ways. I mean, there are still entire areas of the city that are uninhabited, and then there are places that are quite vulnerable, but where nonetheless they have gone in and rebuilt, the lower Ninth Ward in particular, but they're trying to figure out how to put houses on stilts and all kinds of, outlandish things. And then other places in the country have moved their towns up 100 feet on a bluff to avoid spending more federal money on bailing out flood victims. So what I wanted to ask each of you is, what are businesses telling you these days in this economy, with the communications capacity they have? What do you hear? What are the trends you're hearing in terms of what businesses want that may be sort of novel or of recent emergence these days? What do they come to you and want? I'll start with you, Christian.
Well, some few years ago, when we talked with the companies, enterprises, they were very much asking why design. And for the last couple of years, they started to ask how design. So they've been developing for the last years, I would say. During the crisis, our selling point is that you can also use design as a method to decrease your production costs. So that can be used and does work as a door opener to the enterprises. And once they're started, they also have a focus on the more positive sides of design. So I would say that convincing the companies that as I said, it can be used also as a method to decrease your production costs, that does help.
So compelling economics, I guess, is what you would call it.
Absolutely.
Sanna-Mari?
We've had a lot of experience with companies from traditional business areas, forestry, hard technology, that have started to use design and design knowledge as a means to educate their own staff. And we've created programs together, and we are in the process of creating programs with these companies in order to get their staff, and I mean everybody in their staff, to gain more knowledge about design, about the processes involved in their particular company, and through that process get people more into the design thinking that, again, could save cost and cut corners when you can get all the staff and all the people involved in production or planning to kind of see things from a different perspective. And we've had some really good results in small and medium-sized companies using these types of methods, and I think we're just starting to realize the potential in larger companies in using this as a means to really get your staff involved in new ways.
To reduce waste, improve efficiency. I mean, probably the most as all-encompassing and yet as abstract as design can seem, the best description I've ever heard was Charles Eames, who said design is the sum of all constraints. Simple as that. So if you can teach people at the granular level on shop floors and in clerks' offices and things to improve their processes, I guess that sounds like what you're talking about. How about you?
Yeah, I don't think we have many programs. We don't have so many programs like that going on in Iceland right now. We have had some small, we've started to work with like the Innovation Center and other centers in drawing together designers and companies in small projects. But we don't have like huge success stories yet. But we are a bit behind, I would say, the other Scandinavian countries in that sense, or Nordic countries. So, yeah.
Lavrans, are you hearing new things from people?
Well, I could give you a couple of examples from a service designer's perspective. So we work with the biggest hospital in Norway, and we work with the biggest insurance company in Norway. Now, funnily enough, these are clearly service providers, but somehow they're organized as if they were factories in silos, and they're looking at value chains and so on. And they've been incredibly concerned with the efficiency of their production of patients or of insurance policies. And suddenly they see that on the private sector side, competitiveness isn't just about effectiveness, it's about the customer. Surprise, surprise. And in hospitals, it's really about what the patients think about their treatment. And then comes the question, who's got the degree in customer orientation? And that's where suddenly they see that actually designers know how to do these things. So we see that that's where business and public organizations suddenly pull designers in to perform new tasks.
It's interesting because some businesses hold it as an article of faith that the customer is always right, the customer always has the best idea, and other people just say, well, the customer is always the customer. So what are you hearing these days, Robin?
Well, if you look at what they're asking for and you look at what they need, so to speak, they're a little bit two different things. I think the need is more, if you take all the touch points that customers or the target group or however you define it needs, is that first thing when they go on the web, they talk to a friend, they call you, you answer the phone, whatever it may be. But the company is one company and needs to be portrayed as one company no matter where the user, the customer, the person is going to meet you. Now, if you have different messages, just because you didn't think about what you're going to send out as a message, you might be having a great, or your web page might be fantastic, but when you answer the phone, it doesn't match up. Or when you send out the product, or the service provided doesn't match up. Or even if you're great all the way up until they receive whatever that is, the service, the product. Let's take an example. You receive a bicycle. You see it on the web, you order it, you get it home, you love your bicycle, you tell all your friends it's a fantastic thing, and then something happens. It breaks down. And it takes minutes. And all of a sudden, it's the worst bicycle in the world because somebody in the customer center or the wherever repair shop said that, no, I can't do this, you have to send it to this place or whatever. And that bicycle, the physical object that was fantastic, is within a very short period of time now a piece of crap. People don't like it just because somebody couldn't service the bicycle. And you need to have all these links in this chain be golden. Otherwise, if you get some rusty links, the whole thing is going to be rusty. And that is something we need to teach the companies, could be a hospital, saying that everything is perfect in this hospital. But once you come to the hospital, they tell you that you came too late or you did this or this and this. Instead of saying, welcome to this hotel. Check into this hotel, we'll take care of you, whatever. So you need to make sure that the patient, the customer, the person is treated in the way that you want them to be treated. That is what the company wants to send out as a message. And that is not always the case. So we try to sort of get that message across.
You can have all the service design, systems design, product and sort of hardware design you want, but really it's a work ethic, it's a service ethic that connects the quality of the product with the quality of the response you get when you interact with the company. I mean, there is often a detachment among individuals. You know, that's somebody else's job, that's somebody else's problem.
And
when it works, it works. Not it's a joy.
You got to design all those touch points.
Exactly. Yeah.
No matter if it's an app for your iPhone or if it's something that's physical and you actually go there.
Sure.
But you got to design every single moment.
Yeah.
It's like designing a meeting. Do you want to win this negotiation, or do you just want to sit there? You got to design the meeting, the location, all those things.
Okay, but I'm going to turn it over to questions from the audience in a moment. But I want to ask, how do each of you measure the success of your efforts? I mean, is it greater sales? Is it more contracts? Is it more production? What do you look for, knowing that what you're doing in terms of supporting design is going well?
Well, in general, it's very difficult to measure your design investments, because those companies who invest in design are very often very professional into other areas as well, marketing, production, whatever. And we're still trying to figure out how you can develop some methods which is valid, and we haven't succeeded yet, because you can't see what is what. So what we do in Denmark is that will be measured whether we do succeed convincing enterprises to increase their design investments. And there are a lot of analysis which is supposed to bring up the documentation that it does pay off, it does give you return on investment investing in design, but it's very difficult to measure. And I know that Sweden are having some difficulties as well, I think, but you have some very convincing results, as far as I remember.
You want me to respond there?
If you want to.
I would be happy to. Yeah. Do you want me to respond? Yeah. Well, what we did was we went out and asked a bunch of companies, about 1,100 companies, a lot of questions. How do you work with design? Where is it in your company? What are the investments, and so on and so on, and got some numbers. And what we found out was that if you have numbers to show other corporations, companies, government, whatever it is, it works fairly well. If you can say that 53% of all the companies do this, or 28% of the companies do this, and the companies that export, they export more if they use design at this level instead of this level. And if we're talking levels, you have design here. At the bottom level, where people don't know that design exists, that's about 25% of all the companies. They just don't, they never talk about it, they don't know about it, they just don't know. And then the next level, design as styling, form giving. The next level, design as a process. And then at the top, design as a strategy that drives innovation. And at the top, we can really see that there are benefits. That's where the leverage is the biggest. And if you can show those numbers, you can also show that it makes sense and that they will make more money. Because usually that's what they're looking for. How can we make more money if we use design?
Right. Yeah, otherwise, if you can't show it, it's just magic. And it's one of those things you don't notice unless you don't have it. You notice the poor performance because of a lack of design rather than the improved performance because of a presence of design. Sanna-Mari, can you tell us a little bit about how you look for success in your efforts?
Well, part of our bidding process to become World Design Capital, part of the process was to get involved and get committed to creating this tool called Return on Design, the ROD tool. And we are right now trying to benchmark with different countries that already have some success and have used measurements and have good results. But also we're trying to develop it in conjunction with agencies and NGOs that are already doing research in the same field. And as a result, hopefully in 2013 we'll have some sort of tool. It's not going to be the tool, but it will be a start in order to be able to really measure return on design. A good example is from service design. There is a company called Jatta in Finland who is specialized in service design. And they did this survey on their immediate customer organizations and businesses, where they asked the organizations if their service business was customer-oriented. And then again, they went back to the customers and asked if they felt like the business they were receiving or the service they were receiving was customer-oriented. 80% of the businesses said that they have really, delivered a customer-oriented service. 4% of the customers said that they received customer-oriented service. So there is some work there to be done.
Hadla, what would you be looking for?
Well, we haven't started very many measurements yet.
Okay.
We are just starting at making the design policy and focusing on that.
Sure.
But of course, like the others, we seek to see how the companies start to work with designers. Of course, that has grown quite a lot, but also we have a lot of designers starting their own companies. So that's a bit different, or, I mean, that's the thing happening in Iceland right now, that there are lots of new companies coming up, starting from the designers. New companies in fashion design, product design, and that's a very interesting thing to see. So I think we have to focus on doing this on both sides, from behalf of, from the side of the companies, but also it's very important to strengthen the design part of it. Yeah.
Lavrans, what do you look for?
Norway did a big survey last year, similar to what Robin talks about, where also they found the same correlations. So if your company is an active design user, you're more likely to bring new products and services to market than your competitors. If your company uses design, you're more likely to produce more innovations than companies that don't. If you're an active user of design, your company is likely to become more valuable compared to your competitors. So those correlations, I think, were really important in terms of making the design council's work legitimate. But then there are also some things that shouldn't be measured, which is design for the greater good. So there's a program called Design Without Borders, where designers go to the third world to use their knowledge to try to improve things on the ground. There's something called the State's Design Competition every year, and this year it's about design in healthcare. And there I think the goal is basically to open up the market. And for a market to exist, you need to have clients who want to buy it. You have to have designers that can supply it, and so on. So I think there are different ways of measuring it, but the numbers are pretty clear.
The examples I'm most familiar with in my own work are revolve around sustainability in architecture and in landscape architecture, and there are rating systems by which you can get various levels of a recognition for the energy efficiency, air quality, water quality effects of your architecture or landscape designs. It's a very new field, and people are still trying to figure out what metrics they should be paying attention to. Building design is a little farther along. Landscape design is just beginning to figure out how to measure whether you're harming or helping the climate, water quality, pollution in general. One interesting sort of conundrum is in historic preservation, where it's intuitive that reusing an older building is much more sustainable, or much more conservative, I guess you would say in a strictest sense, than tearing down a building and building anew. However, you get, under the dominant sustainability rating system in this country, you get the same amount of points toward your certification, whether it's silver, gold, or platinum. You get the same amount of points for reusing an existing building as you get for laying a bamboo floor. And people get very angry about this and say, I should get more points than this, and it should really raise my score up quite a bit. The thing is, there is no science to tell you this is true. And the system that they're using, this LEED system, is science-based, completely science-based. So they're now working on, with the National Trust for Historic Preservation and other sort of standards and testing groups, to start to measure what the benefits are of reusing an older building. But until they do, it won't gain you anything in terms of brownie points, as we call them, to boost your certification, your rating in this system. So there's a long way to go with all these things. What I'd like to do now, oh yes, Robin, please.
I just want to add one more thing. Considering most of us here are government funded and federal government funded, one way of measuring it is to see what the regional governments and the local governments are doing. If we go out and we talk to the regional governments, are they actually then promoting design so that they help their local companies? If they do, and if they continue to do that, and the programs are growing, and they're using, in our case, a lot of European Union funding and so on that's matched with local funding, then the government sees that it's important. If they don't do that and nobody listens, well, why should then the government support us to do that? And then you can understand the rest.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's been a key factor for the federal government's support for better architecture at the federal level, is how many localities, cities and towns are improving their architecture as a result, and urban design and sustainability as a result of the federal government's leadership. It's a really good sign if they are, and they have made a big difference in 20 years since they started this program. Otherwise, local governments really weren't thinking, they just kind of build a building and it may look like an IBM card or some other ghastly thing built by WASPs. Now they're actually trying to think of how does this fit into our city. So it's always a good sign when you see local and state governments following the federal government's lead. Yes, Lavrans.
Forgot the time. Just to pick up on your sustainability question within the policy context, I think policy can do two things. You can either pay someone to develop something new, which we've been talking a lot about today, or you can stop someone from doing something by law. And I think both are really interesting drivers for new and innovative design. So, for instance, by establishing environmental laws, the minister talked about universal access, this idea that you need to design for the elderly, for the handicapped, the young, and everyone else, and make it still look good. I think that some really innovative things come out of that. As an example, there's a company on the west coast of Norway that design bathrooms for elderly people according to very strict regulation to avoid falls and stuff like that in elderly homes. But they've done it really nice, and it's turning into a great export product. So I think that's another way where policy really can stimulate really interesting design as well. So not just throwing money at it.
Sure. Okay, I'd like to open it up to the audience now and see whether any of you have questions for the panel. Yes?
So I'd like to know about how your governments are also focusing their attention on design excellence in their infrastructure projects. We've talked about the private sector, which we know in the United States has its issues with regard to kind of adopting issues of design policies, and the federal government would touch it with 10 policy. But with regard to, in the United States, we had a stimulus package and it went to a lot of asphalt.
Yeah.
And in each of your countries, you have shown a lot of leadership in terms of what you've done in terms of bringing design excellence to something that is there to improve your societies over generations. And so if you could talk a little bit about that, that would be terrific.
I'll start. In some of the new strategies and attempts on writing policies, they're saying that the governments should be a showcase for the rest to follow. And at least they're writing that, and we're seeing some attempts of that happening. So we're not there yet, but it looks like they're starting to understand that design can be a part of improving our society. And if that's going to happen, they need to be the first ones to adopt it so that others will follow.
We can recognize that in Denmark as well. The public sector haven't been good enough using design themselves, but things are changing these years, I would say.
Yeah, our stimulus projects were kind of disappointing in the levels of innovation. We just put more roads in. Anybody else have any questions? Yes.
About educational policy and
yes.
finding your
Good question.
growth in the design programs, architecture. I think I know of. I know Helsinki has a great university, the Helsinki University of Art and Technology, which merged with the two other universities. Is there an increase in industrial design students? Is that also true in Iceland?
Yes, definitely. If I can start, the Iceland Academy of the Arts has been developing drastically during the last 10 years. So now we are educating architects in Iceland, which was not the case before. They all came from different countries, you know, educating themselves in the States or in Scandinavia or in Europe. So as a group, they were quite, you know, they didn't have the same educational ground. So this is a very interesting development. Also, fashion designers have been are starting to be educated as well as product designers. So that's a big change, and that has a lot of influence on the situation that we find us in right now.
Well, those where those entrepreneurs are coming from that are creating these companies in Iceland, these younger companies.
Yes, some of them come from the school, but of course some of them come from other places. But this makes a sort of a melting point or pot, which is quite interesting now, because there are lots of, and there comes quite a lot of pressure with these students, because they need, like fashion designers, they come out, they don't have an industry to go to, so they have to start their own things, and that's also, and yeah, also the case with product designers, that and they're very sustainably thinking and environmentally thinking, and they're looking for opportunities all over the country, going out, so with quite a new vision of how to do things. But it will take some time for the industry and the government to understand this, because it's quite new. So that's what we've, yeah.
Well, the case in Denmark is that we do have a lot of unemployed designers. And the discussions are going on these years whether the design schools are educating the designers being artists instead of designers who can work in a more industrial field. And the Danish government has just established a visionary design board. The thing is that it has been announced that in 2010, Denmark shall be among the world's 10 richest countries and most innovative businesses in the world, which is very, very ambitious. And the question is, can we reach that goal? And to try to answer that question, the government is, as I mentioned, is very much focusing on design as an innovation driver. And this visionary design board is supposed to look on the educational side of the business as well, and is supposed to consider whether the educational system is well functioning or not. And the head of this board is the dean of the Copenhagen Business School, who is from Finland actually, and he's very much inspired of the Aalto University, which is, as far as I know, something like a merger between the design schools and the business schools and the engineering schools, right? So maybe we will have a fresh look on the educational system in Denmark, facing the problem that we do have a lot of unemployed designers.
Interesting. Robin? I'd like to latch on to that one. We have some unemployed designers in Sweden as well, but I'd like to go back to the question about the educational system. I do not think that the educational system is moving as fast as it should in terms of educating designers that are ready to tackle the challenges that our society has today, because we're still educating industrial designers that make pretty objects. And if we educated designers that looked at what society needs, no matter if it's infrastructure or if it's service design or hospitals or healthcare or whatever it may be, we'd have a lot more designers out in industry where people would say they are actually adding something on to the business that other people aren't doing. They have something, they have a different way of thinking, instead of saying, oh, you're a designer, you make pretty things. We're still sort of in that era of making pretty things, or things that make a sound when you drop them on the floor or whatever. Not in designers are actually process people, and they can help us look at things in a different way. So we need the education to move and change faster than it is today, actually. And I think, mentioned here, the Aalto has that aim. And everybody's sort of looking at Helsinki and the Aalto school, or there's one in Shanghai as well, but to see how that's going to work out. It's very exciting.
Around 2 years ago, there was a big change in Helsinki for the university system, where the Helsinki Business School, an independent business university, emerged with the School of Art and Design and the University of Technology, created this huge new university called Aalto University. And the results have been amazing. It's not resulted in increasing of student places for design schools or architectures, but it has increased the awareness and the working together of the business school, the engineering school, and the designers. And the results have really been amazing. They have created this creative lab where all these different types of students can come together and work on projects that will be developed into businesses. And they took this whole idea and this ideology and started to also work together with Tongji University in Shanghai, where the results have been very good. I was there just a few weeks ago to observe the students and work with them on the World Design Capital concept. And it seems to be very easily transferable idea. So we really look forward to sharing that with other similar universities.
That's great, cross-disciplinary. Yes?
Question. Craftsmanship, when I think of Nordic design, I think of a high level of craftsmanship. I haven't heard that term yet, I don't think. But I'm wondering how your design policies, or even in services, craftsmanship or work ethic, is there any focus on that, or anything from your culture that you bring up related to your design program?
I'll take that one, Robin. Okay, go ahead.
I'll go first again. We have a program, government program right now, where we are focusing on the actual designers and to educate them and to make them better in terms of what they're doing, so that they then will become better business people and be able to help businesses as well. And I think in that program, we're looking also at making them do their skills better so that they will be appreciated more. So that's one part of it. But I think what we've talked about here mostly this evening is how can design become a part of business or the public sector to help us grow as a society, not necessarily how can design, once again, make pretty things.
Yes.
I'm in the board of the Royal Academy in Denmark. So, and I think the basic problem we have with education is that we have teachers who came in at 68 and they're still sitting there. To change the game, you have to cut, and you have to cut everybody in one season and open again. I know it's sort of very
ruthless
way of doing it, but I think the change is so big. So I can see it in Denmark. You know, we're educating architects and designers to be one artist. They don't do group work. Yeah. They work on their own. So they go the traditional way that we've done since the 50s, and there is no one asking for that service when they finish.
Sure.
So we have to learn about business. I know on Pratt Institute here you have a design management program, which is getting very interesting, and they have one in Hong Kong, which is very interesting. I'm trying to set up one in Singapore where you have 2 years of basis with business and designers doing the first 2 years together, and they split up. And I think that is the way. And I'm also in Index, and in Index we have a whole educational system, and we just stopped educating grown-ups. We start with people in school, because that's where you have to do the change. I don't think that my age professors will change. No way. Either you cut them all and put young people. And I think that's a problem in the Nordic countries. We don't do that, so those die slowly, right? And then you'll have the new ones. But it will take 10 to 50 years.
It's a provocative theory. I'm going to take one more, and then we need to wrap up. Yes?
Actually, it's funny that he spoke just before me, because I'm actually in the Pratt Design Management program. So I actually wanted to build on what he was saying. The topic that I was most interested in was not so much design as a tool of innovation, because that is something we discussed, but design for the greater good was mentioned. So I just wanted to ask if you guys would consider design as a tool for shaping behaviors and attitudes, as well as, approach to products and services.
Yeah, the social capital, I guess you could say. How do you feel about that?
Well, that's a question about work ethic, and personally, I don't think people like us should shape behaviors, but I think we should spend our time to create fantastic platforms for people to develop their own behaviors, to exchange value in good ways, and so on. So I think we should focus on the platforms more than the behaviors itself. I think we should leave it up to people to behave.
But if we drive environmental and sustainability issues with what we do, we will drive behavior, no matter what happens. I mean, no matter if we intend it to happen or not. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges we have, is to change what we do in terms of looking at how that in the future will shape a new type of society that is sustainable. And of course, people will change as things that are offered to them are changing. So I think designers have a great part of that, and considering traditionally 75 to 80% of the environmental impact of a product, a physical object, is determined early in the design phase. We should be able to, by using the design processes and design thinking, be able to do that even when it comes to services and how we shape our societies. So I think we have a huge part in creating our future societies.
I'll take one more question since we have such interest. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Peter Christensen. I'm from the Council for the Icelandic Consulate in New York. I wanted to offer maybe a view at the same time that view might become a question for the panel. We touched on the infrastructure and the design, how we can use design to change our society to the better. And I wanted to give you a kind of a glimpse of Iceland from a 40,000 feet view. Over 80% of our energy use, total energy use, is from renewables, from hydro and geothermal. 99% of our space heating is from geothermal. That in the mid-70s became a conscious decision between the government, the municipalities, and also the public to, as a response to a situation that was not servicing the public very well, which was the gas prices. So the Icelandic government and the towns, they changed the whole infrastructure from being coal, from being oil heating over to geothermal and using what we had. We had been in geothermal for 70, 80 years, utilizing it for power as well as central heating. But it was probably a 30 to 40 year engineering design project to get where we are today. So now we have over 80% of our energy use, and we are working on, we like to say we're working on the rest. With probably 2 programs now in Iceland, the hydrogen program to bring electricity to the streets, as well as electric cars. So now the government companies in Iceland, power companies and others, and the public are working together in that program, for example, with the electricity car, to build the infrastructure, to test the cars, to see how they work for the individual, doing surveys on how hydrogen works in the society. I mean, when I was a kid, we thought the Dr. Hydrogen, who was the grandfather of hydrogen in Iceland, we thought it was great, and he was going to blow up the island 35 years ago with his research and his dream for Iceland to become a hydrogen society. So that's kind of maybe the big design project in Iceland that we are working on in a way. So I would like to, maybe the panel could tell us a little bit, does Scandinavia in general have that dream of sustainable energy society, and are we working on it in the different Scandinavian countries?
When it comes to Denmark, we have a very long tradition into windmills, and they are governmentally supported as well in Denmark as other countries. So it is, I would say, part of our DNA to being environmental focused. And in Denmark as well, we are working with electric cars. And the system is in Denmark that, as mentioned yesterday, when you buy a car in Denmark, you pay something like 400% in tax of the value of the car. But if you buy an electric car, you don't pay tax until by the end of 2012 so far. So let's see what will happen after 2012. But it's also when it comes to the welfare system, we have a lot of focus on how design can be used into the welfare system these years. And when it comes to the waste issues in Denmark, we are trying to solve the waste problems in Denmark, including design methods to solve those problems. So in general, I would say yes.
Well, I want to. Did you have? Okay. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank our panelists. I'd like to thank all of you for attending. It's been very enlightening.
I'd like to join in thanking our panel. It's fascinating, and again, a wonderful cross-section of Nordic design and life. A lot of different points of view. Very pleased to have you all here this evening. We have some wine being served outside, so please join us now, and thank you all again.